Somebody listening to me right now has been fighting battles in silence, battles in your family, battles in your finances, battles that have tried to convince you that your situation will never change. But I came with a prophetic announcement today. The same God who parted the Red Sea is still making ways where there are no ways. What looked like a delay was never a denial. Heaven has been preparing a breakthrough with your name on it, and today we are about to step into a moment of divine intervention. There are seasons when the enemy attacks the two places that matter most, your family and your finances, because he knows if he can disrupt your home and drain your resources, he can weaken your faith. But the devil underestimated the power of a praying believer. When you begin to pray with authority, when you begin to speak with faith, heaven responds. Angels move, chains break, doors open that no man can shut. And today we are going to pray until every generational curse, every financial struggle, and every spirit of division in your family is broken. I want you to understand something powerful. Breakthrough does not happen by accident. It happens by spiritual alignment. When your faith, your words, and your prayers come into agreement with the promises of God, the supernatural begins to manifest in the natural. So if you've been believing God for restoration in your family, if you've been praying for financial miracles, if you've been asking God to turn your situation around, today is not just another prayer moment. This is a divine appointment. Before we begin this breakthrough prayer, I want you to participate in this moment of faith. Like this video and subscribe to the channel for daily prayer that will strengthen your spirit and empower your faith. And right now, I want you to type Amen in the comments as a declaration that you are in agreement with the power of God moving in your life today. And I also want you to comment one thing you are believing God for today, whether it's healing in your family, restoration in relationships, debt cancellation, financial increase, or a miracle you've been waiting for. Because when faith is released and believers come into agreement, miracles happen. Get ready, because we are about to enter a powerful breakthrough prayer for miracles in your family and finances. There is a dimension of prayer that goes beyond routine words and familiar phrases. It is the kind of prayer that shifts atmospheres, dismantles invisible barriers, and invites the power of God to move in ways that change lives. Breakthrough prayer is not simply speaking to God. It is aligning your spirit with His authority and allowing faith to rise above every limitation. Many people pray hoping something will happen, but breakthrough prayer is different. It is prayer that carries expectation, prayer that carries confidence, prayer that knows that heaven is listening and heaven is responding. Sometimes life places you in moments where ordinary prayer does not feel strong enough. You may be facing family struggles that seem complicated or financial pressures that feel overwhelming. In those moments, your heart begins to cry out for something deeper. That cry is where breakthrough prayer begins. It begins when your spirit refuses to accept defeat. It begins when your faith reaches beyond what you see and grabs hold of what God has promised. Breakthrough prayer comes from a place of spiritual determination that says, I will not stop believing. I will not stop trusting. I will not stop calling on the name of the Lord. There is power in understanding that prayer is not a passive activity. Prayer is a spiritual force. It is a moment where heaven and earth meet. When a believer begins to pray with faith, something begins to move in the unseen realm. Circumstances that look permanent begin to shift. Obstacles that looked impossible begin to weaken. Doors that looked permanently closed begin to open in ways that only God can orchestrate. Prayer is not just communication. It is participation in the power of God. Breakthrough prayer carries a certain posture of the heart. It is calm, but it is confident. It is peaceful, but it is powerful. It is not driven by panic or fear. Instead, it flows from the understanding that God is faithful and that His promises cannot fail. When you pray from this place, you are no longer begging for help. You are standing in agreement with what God has already spoken over your life. Faith begins to rise quietly but strongly within your spirit. Many times people feel discouraged in prayer because they are looking for immediate evidence. They pray once, and when nothing appears to change right away, doubt begins to whisper in their mind. But breakthrough prayer teaches us patience and persistence. It reminds us that every sincere prayer is heard. Even when the answer has not yet appeared in the natural, God is already working behind the scenes. Heaven begins to move long before the visible miracle arrives. There is something remarkable about the way prayer strengthens the heart of the believer. When you pray, peace begins to settle over your thoughts. Anxiety begins to lose its grip. The things that once felt heavy begin to feel lighter because you have placed them in the hands of God. Prayer shifts your perspective. Instead of focusing on the size of the problem, your attention begins to rest on the greatness of God. Breakthrough prayer also teaches us the importance of faith-filled words. The words you release during prayer carry spiritual influence. When you speak words of faith, you are declaring what you believe God is able to do. Your voice becomes a vessel through which hope flows. Every declaration of trust strengthens your spirit and weakens the power of fear. Your prayers become seeds planted in the soil of faith, and in time those seeds grow into testimonies. It is important to understand that God responds to faith, not perfection. You do not have to have the perfect vocabulary or the perfect structure in your prayers. What matters is the sincerity of your heart. When your spirit reaches out to God with trust, heaven listens. Breakthrough prayer is not about impressing anyone with eloquent words. It is about opening your heart and allowing faith to speak. There are moments when prayer feels quiet and gentle, like a whisper in the presence of God. In those moments, you may simply sit in stillness and allow your spirit to rest. Even in that calm silence, God is at work. Breakthrough prayer does not always look dramatic. Sometimes it is peaceful, steady, and deeply reassuring. It is the quiet confidence that God is present and that his power is moving in ways we cannot fully see. Faith grows stronger each time you pray. Every prayer becomes a reminder that you are not alone. Every moment in God's presence renews your strength. As you continue to pray, your heart begins to develop a deeper trust in the character of God. You begin to recognize that he is not distant or unaware of your struggles. He is attentive, compassionate, and deeply involved in every detail of your life. Breakthrough prayer also reminds us that God's timing is perfect. Sometimes answers come quickly, and other times they unfold gradually. But in every situation, God is working with wisdom that surpasses human understanding. What may feel like delay is often preparation. God prepares circumstances, prepares people, and prepares your heart so that when the breakthrough arrives, it will bring lasting transformation. The power of prayer is often revealed in the moments when you choose to pray even when it feels difficult. There may be days when your faith feels strong and confident, and there may be days when you feel tired or uncertain. Breakthrough prayer continues in both seasons. It continues when your voice feels bold and when your voice feels quiet. Consistency in prayer builds spiritual endurance. As you pray, your awareness of God's presence becomes stronger. You begin to notice the subtle ways he guides your steps. You may feel a sense of peace about a decision or receive clarity about a path forward. Prayer opens your heart to divine guidance. It allows you to hear the gentle direction of the Holy Spirit leading you toward the purposes God has prepared. Breakthrough prayer is also an act of surrender. It is the moment when you release control and trust that God knows what is best. Surrender does not mean giving up hope. It means placing your hope in the hands of the one who holds the future. When you surrender your concerns to God, you free your heart from the burden of trying to solve everything on your own. There is something deeply comforting about knowing that prayer connects you to a loving Father. God listens with compassion and responds with wisdom. Every concern you bring before him matters. Nothing is too small for his attention, and nothing is too large for his power. Prayer reminds us that we belong to a God who cares deeply about our well-being. The more you pray, the more your heart begins to align with God's perspective. You begin to see situations through the lens of faith rather than fear. Challenges that once looked overwhelming begin to look manageable because you recognize that God is working alongside you. Prayer transforms the way you approach life's difficulties. Breakthrough prayer often begins with gratitude. When you thank God for what he has already done, your heart becomes filled with hope for what he will continue to do. Gratitude opens the door for joy to enter your spirit. It reminds you that God has been faithful in the past and that his faithfulness continues in the present. As you spend time in prayer, you may begin to sense a gentle strength rising within you. It is the quiet assurance that God is guiding your steps. This strength is not based on your own ability. It comes from the presence of God working within your life. Prayer nourishes that strength and allows it to grow day by day. Breakthrough prayer is also a moment of spiritual renewal. When you come into God's presence, your mind begins to rest and your spirit begins to refresh. The worries that once crowded your thoughts begin to fade. In their place comes a calm confidence that everything will unfold according to God's perfect plan. Sometimes the greatest breakthrough happens within your heart before it appears in your circumstances. Prayer changes you from the inside out. It strengthens your patience, deepens your faith, and fills your spirit with peace. When your heart is transformed, you are better prepared to recognize the blessings God places along your path. Breakthrough prayer reminds us that miracles often begin quietly. A small shift in perspective, a moment of renewed hope, or a gentle sense of peace can be the beginning of something extraordinary. God works in ways that are both powerful and subtle, weaving together circumstances to accomplish his purposes. Every time you pray, you are stepping into a sacred conversation with the creator of the universe. That realization alone carries profound meaning. The God who formed the stars and shaped the oceans invites you into his presence. He listens, he understands, and he responds with wisdom and love. Prayer teaches us to trust the unseen work of God. Even when circumstances appear unchanged, faith continues to believe that God is moving in ways that will eventually become clear. Trust grows stronger with every prayer offered in sincerity and hope. As you continue in breakthrough prayer, your heart becomes a place of peace rather than worry. You begin to rest in the knowledge that God is handling the details of your life. This peace does not depend on perfect circumstances. It flows from the presence of God within your spirit. The journey of prayer is not about reaching a destination as quickly as possible. It is about walking closely with God each day. Through prayer, you discover that his presence is constant and his love is unwavering. Every moment spent in prayer becomes a reminder that you are supported by a divine strength that never fails. There are moments in life when human strength reaches its limit. You may try to fix things with wisdom, with effort, with careful planning. Yet the situation still feels unmoved. It is in these moments that the heart begins to look upward, searching for something greater than human ability. Inviting God's supernatural intervention begins with recognizing that there are dimensions of help that only heaven can provide. It is the quiet awareness that while we do our part in faith and obedience, the true turning point in many situations comes when God himself steps into the circumstance. Supernatural intervention is not simply about dramatic miracles, although God certainly moves in miraculous ways. Sometimes his intervention appears as sudden restoration, unexpected provision, or healing that defies explanation. At other times, it arrives as wisdom in a difficult moment, peace in the middle of chaos, or guidance that leads you in a direction you could not have discovered on your own. The supernatural often moves quietly before it becomes visible, working behind the scenes in ways that human understanding cannot fully trace. Inviting God's intervention begins with humility. It is the moment when a person acknowledges that God's wisdom is greater than their own. Instead of trying to carry every burden alone, the heart opens in trust and says, "Lord, I welcome your presence in this situation." That simple invitation carries tremendous power. God never forces his way into our lives. He responds to the openness of our hearts. When we invite him sincerely, we create space for his guidance and his power to operate. Faith plays a central role in this invitation. Faith does not mean ignoring reality or pretending problems do not exist. Faith simply means believing that God's power is greater than the circumstances we see. It means trusting that the same God who created the universe is able to move within the details of our lives. When you pray with this understanding, your words carry a quiet confidence. You begin to approach God not only with requests, but with expectation. The beauty of inviting God's supernatural intervention is that it brings peace even before the answer arrives. The moment you release your concerns into God's hands, your heart begins to feel lighter. The burden that once felt overwhelming begins to shift because you are no longer carrying it alone. There is a calm assurance that the situation is now under divine care. Even if the outcome has not yet appeared, you know that God is working. Many people imagine that supernatural intervention must always look extraordinary and immediate. Yet God often works through processes that unfold gradually. He may guide conversations that bring reconciliation, open doors that lead to new opportunities, or arrange circumstances that position you exactly where you need to be. What appears ordinary on the surface may actually be the result of God quietly orchestrating events with perfect timing. Inviting God's intervention also involves listening. Prayer is not only about speaking, it is also about creating moments of stillness where the heart becomes attentive. In the quietness of God's presence, thoughts become clearer and direction becomes more visible. Sometimes the guidance you need arrives as a gentle impression in your spirit or a sense of clarity about the next step to take. God often speaks softly, guiding rather than forcing. There is something deeply comforting about knowing that God understands every detail of our lives. Nothing escapes his awareness. The challenges you face, the hopes you carry, and the prayers you whisper are all known to him. When you invite his intervention, you are welcoming the attention of a loving Father who cares about every aspect of your journey. His involvement is not distant or indifferent. It is compassionate and purposeful. The supernatural dimension of God's work often begins in the unseen realm. Long before a breakthrough becomes visible, God may already be aligning circumstances. He may be preparing people to cross your path, creating opportunities that will soon unfold, or strengthening your heart so that you are ready for the next season of your life. What feels like waiting may actually be preparation. Inviting God's intervention requires patience as well as faith. Sometimes we want immediate answers, yet God's timing is guided by wisdom that goes beyond our understanding. The process itself often shapes our character and deepens our trust. As you continue to pray and trust, you begin to recognize that God is not only concerned with solving the problem, but also with transforming the heart of the person who is praying. One of the most powerful aspects of supernatural intervention is that it often brings solutions that human logic could never design. God sees connections and possibilities that remain hidden from our perspective. When he moves, he can create opportunities that no amount of human planning could produce. Doors open that seem permanently closed. Paths appear where none existed before. Trusting God's intervention does not mean becoming passive or inactive. Instead, it means moving forward with faith while remaining attentive to God's guidance. You continue to take responsible steps, but your confidence rests in the knowledge that God is directing your path. This balance between faith and action allows you to walk forward with peace rather than anxiety. As you invite God into your circumstances, your perspective begins to change. Instead of seeing only the difficulty of the moment, you begin to see the possibility of divine purpose. Even challenging seasons can become opportunities for growth and transformation. God has a way of turning obstacles into stepping stones that lead you toward greater strength and understanding. Supernatural intervention often brings unexpected encouragement. You may encounter a word of wisdom from someone at exactly the right time, receive a message that speaks directly to your situation, or feel a renewed sense of hope during prayer. These moments remind you that God is attentive and that he knows precisely what your heart needs. There is also a profound sense of partnership in inviting God's intervention. You are not simply asking God to act while you remain distant. Instead, you are entering into a relationship of trust and cooperation. As you seek his presence, your heart becomes more aligned with his purposes. The desires of your heart begin to reflect his wisdom and love. The more you invite God's supernatural involvement, the more aware you become of his presence in everyday life. Small moments begin to carry deeper meaning. A simple answer to prayer, a moment of unexpected peace, or a timely opportunity can become reminders that God is actively guiding your path. Your awareness of his presence grows stronger with each experience. Prayer becomes the gateway through which supernatural intervention enters your life. It is in prayer that you present your concerns, express your trust, and welcome God's involvement. Prayer creates a sacred space where your heart connects with the heart of God. In that connection, transformation begins to take place. Sometimes the most remarkable aspect of God's intervention is the peace it brings during uncertainty. Even when circumstances remain unresolved, your heart feels steady because you trust that God is in control. This peace becomes a quiet strength that carries you through moments that might otherwise feel overwhelming. Inviting God's supernatural intervention also teaches us gratitude. When you recognize the ways God has worked in your life, your heart naturally becomes thankful. Gratitude deepens your awareness of his faithfulness and strengthens your confidence for the future. Each testimony becomes a reminder that God is continually active in the lives of those who trust him. Faith grows stronger with every experience of God's intervention. Each time you see his hand guiding your life, your confidence in his care increases. What once felt uncertain begins to feel secure because you have witnessed his faithfulness again and again. There is something profoundly calming about surrendering a situation to God. When you release your worries into his hands, your mind becomes quieter and your spirit becomes more peaceful. You realize that the outcome does not depend solely on your effort. The creator of the universe is now involved in the details of your life. Inviting God's intervention also opens the door for transformation within your heart. As you spend time in his presence, your priorities begin to shift. You become more aware of what truly matters and more focused on living with faith and compassion. Prayer not only changes circumstances, it also shapes the person who is praying. God's supernatural work often reveals itself through timing that feels perfectly arranged. Events come together in ways that seem almost impossible to predict. When you look back, you begin to see how each step was guided by a wisdom far greater than your own. What once looked like coincidence becomes evidence of divine orchestration. The more you trust God's intervention, the more you experience freedom from fear. Instead of worrying about every possible outcome, you learn to rest in the assurance that God's plans are good. This freedom allows your heart to remain calm even when life feels uncertain. Supernatural intervention reminds us that we are never truly alone. God's presence surrounds us, guiding and sustaining us through every season. His love remains constant, his wisdom remains available, and his power remains sufficient for every challenge we face. As you continue to invite God into your life through prayer and trust, your journey becomes a story of faith unfolding step by step. Each moment of surrender becomes an opportunity for God's grace to work more deeply within your life. Each prayer becomes a doorway through which divine wisdom and strength begin to flow. The invitation for God's supernatural intervention is always open. It begins with a willing heart, a quiet prayer, and a faith that believes God is able to do far more than we could imagine. In that invitation, the ordinary moments of life become places where heaven gently touches the earth. There are moments when people sense that certain struggles in their lives did not begin with them. Patterns appear that seem to repeat from generation to generation. Conflict within families, cycles of financial hardship, emotional wounds that pass silently from parents to children. When someone becomes aware of these patterns, a deep question often rises in the heart: can these cycles truly be broken? The power of prayer reminds us that no pattern is stronger than the grace and authority of God. What may have traveled through generations can be stopped through faith, wisdom, and a heart that seeks God's healing. Breaking generational curses begins with awareness. Many families carry stories filled with pain, disappointment, or broken relationships that quietly shape the way people see themselves and the world around them. Sometimes those stories create expectations that life will always be difficult or that certain problems are unavoidable. Yet the moment a person becomes aware that these patterns do not have to define the future, hope begins to grow. Awareness becomes the first step toward freedom. Prayer plays a powerful role in this process because prayer invites God into places that may have been wounded for many years. When you bring the history of your family before God, you are acknowledging that healing and restoration are possible. You are opening the door for God's wisdom to move through your life in ways that create new patterns of peace, love, and strength that can transform the future of your family. Many people carry emotional burdens inherited from previous generations. They may not always recognize where these burdens began, but they feel the weight of them in their daily lives. Feelings of fear, insecurity, anger, or discouragement sometimes develop from environments shaped by unresolved struggles. Through prayer, these burdens can be brought into the light of God's presence. The moment they are acknowledged and surrendered to Him, the process of healing begins. Breaking generational cycles also involves forgiveness. Forgiveness does not mean ignoring the pain of the past or pretending that hurtful things never happened. Instead, forgiveness releases the hold that those wounds may have on the present. When someone chooses forgiveness through prayer, they free their heart from the weight of resentment and open themselves to the peace that God desires to bring. This act of release becomes a powerful step toward breaking the patterns that once controlled the family story. Faith reminds us that every generation has the opportunity to choose a new direction. Even if the past contained difficulty, the future does not have to repeat it. God's grace allows each person to become a turning point within their family. Through prayer, wisdom, and intentional choices, one life can influence the lives of many others. A single decision to pursue healing and faith can change the path for generations that follow. Prayer for family restoration often begins quietly. It may start with simple words spoken in sincerity, asking God to bring peace where there has been tension and understanding where there has been conflict. Over time, those prayers begin to shape the atmosphere within the family. Hearts soften, communication improves, and relationships begin to heal. What once seemed impossible slowly becomes possible through God's gentle work. There is something deeply meaningful about praying for the well-being of your family. When you lift the names of loved ones before God, you are expressing a desire for their lives to be filled with hope and purpose. Prayer becomes an act of love, reaching beyond current challenges and believing that God can guide each person toward healing and strength. Breaking generational patterns also requires courage. Sometimes it means choosing a different response than what was modeled in the past. It might mean responding to anger with patience, to criticism with kindness, or to fear with faith. These choices may feel unfamiliar at first, yet they create a new environment where healthier relationships can grow. God's presence has a remarkable ability to transform even the most complicated family situations. When people begin to pray for one another, walls that once separated them can slowly come down. Misunderstandings can be replaced with compassion, and old conflicts can begin to lose their power. The atmosphere of a home changes when God's peace becomes part of daily life. Breaking generational curses also means replacing negative expectations with faith-filled vision. Instead of believing that problems will continue forever, you begin to believe that God is able to create a new story. This shift in perspective is powerful because it changes how you approach the future. Faith allows you to see possibilities where there once seemed to be none. Many people discover that when they begin praying intentionally for their families, they also experience personal transformation. Prayer softens the heart, increases patience, and deepens compassion. As your relationship with God grows stronger, your ability to respond with wisdom and understanding also increases. This personal growth becomes part of the healing process within the family. Generational healing often happens gradually. It unfolds through consistent prayer, honest conversations, and a willingness to seek understanding. There may be moments of progress and moments that require patience, yet each step forward carries significance. Every act of kindness, every prayer spoken in faith, and every moment of forgiveness contributes to building a healthier future. God's grace extends across generations. What begins with one person's decision to pursue faith can influence children, grandchildren, and beyond. When someone chooses to pray for their family and believe for restoration, they are planting seeds of hope that can continue to grow for many years. These seeds may appear small at first, yet their impact can be profound. It is important to remember that no family is perfect. Every family has experienced moments of difficulty and misunderstanding. The goal is not perfection, but healing. Through prayer, families can move toward greater unity and mutual support. God's presence brings wisdom that helps people navigate differences with patience and respect. Prayer also strengthens the spiritual foundation of a family. When faith becomes part of everyday life, it creates an environment where trust and love can flourish. Children grow up witnessing the importance of seeking God in times of joy and in times of challenge. This example becomes a guiding light for future generations. Breaking generational cycles means choosing hope over despair. It means believing that God's power to restore is greater than any history of difficulty. With every prayer, you are affirming that your family's future can be filled with new opportunities and deeper connection. Sometimes the most powerful prayers are those spoken quietly in moments of reflection. When you bring your family before God, you are acknowledging that His wisdom is greater than any human solution. You are trusting that He understands the complexities of every relationship and that He is able to guide each heart toward healing. God's love has the ability to reach into places where pain once lived and replace it with peace. Through prayer, those who have felt distant from one another can begin to reconnect. Through patience and grace, families can rediscover the joy of supporting and encouraging one another. Breaking generational curses is not only about removing what was harmful, it is also about building what is good. It involves creating traditions of kindness, communication, and spiritual growth that strengthen the bonds within the family. These positive patterns become the legacy that future generations inherit. As you continue praying for your family, you may notice small changes that reflect God's work. Conversations may become more open, forgiveness may come more easily, and moments of unity may become more frequent. These changes are signs that healing is taking place. Faith invites us to believe that even the most difficult family stories can be rewritten through God's grace. What once felt like a cycle of struggle can become a testimony of restoration. Through prayer, love, and perseverance, families can discover new beginnings filled with hope. Let me ask you something that requires honest reflection. Have you ever noticed a pattern in your family, something that seems to repeat across generations, and wished it could finally stop with you? Maybe it is conflict, fear, financial struggle, or broken relationships. What is one pattern you are believing God to break in your family's story? Take a moment to think about that question, because awareness is often the beginning of transformation. When you identify what needs healing, you can bring it before God with clarity and faith. Your willingness to acknowledge the need for change is already a step toward freedom. I want to invite you to participate in this moment of reflection. Share your answer in the comments and be honest about what you are believing God to restore or transform within your family. Your words may encourage someone else who is walking through a similar journey, reminding them that they are not alone in believing for healing and new beginnings. There is something sacred about the atmosphere of a home. A home is more than walls and rooms. It is the place where hearts grow, where relationships are formed, and where people learn what love, trust, and belonging truly feel like. When unity, peace, and love fill a home, it becomes a place of strength and comfort for everyone inside it. But when tension, misunderstanding, or unresolved pain enter that same space, the atmosphere can begin to feel heavy. Restoring unity, peace, and love in the home begins with recognizing that God deeply cares about the condition of our relationships. Many people quietly carry the desire for a peaceful home. They long for conversations filled with understanding rather than conflict, moments of laughter rather than silence, and relationships built on respect rather than frustration. These desires are not unrealistic dreams. They reflect the kind of harmony that God intends for families to experience. Through prayer, patience, and intentional choices, the atmosphere of a home can gradually shift from tension to peace. Peace in a home often begins within the heart of each individual. When someone invites God's presence into their daily life, their inner world begins to change. The peace that comes from prayer slowly influences their reactions, their tone of voice, and the way they respond to challenges. Instead of reacting quickly in anger or frustration, they begin to respond with calmness and understanding. This inner transformation becomes the first step toward restoring peace in the environment around them. Unity within a family does not mean that everyone will always agree. Differences in personality, opinions, and perspectives are natural in any relationship. True unity comes from the willingness to respect one another despite those differences. It grows when people choose to listen carefully, speak kindly, and value the thoughts and feelings of those around them. Unity is built through small daily acts of patience and compassion. Love is the foundation that holds a family together. Genuine love is not limited to moments when everything feels easy. It continues even when misunderstandings arise. Love chooses forgiveness when hurt occurs and chooses encouragement when someone feels discouraged. When love becomes the guiding principle in a home, it creates an environment where each person feels valued and supported. Restoring peace in the home often begins with communication. Many conflicts grow simply because people stop listening to one another. Words may be spoken quickly without understanding the deeper feelings behind them. When family members take the time to listen with patience, they begin to see situations from each other's perspective. This understanding reduces tension and opens the door for healing conversations. Prayer has a remarkable ability to soften hearts. When you pray for your family members, your perspective begins to change. Instead of focusing only on the things that frustrate you, you begin to notice their struggles, their hopes, and their needs. Prayer fills the heart with compassion and reminds us that every person is on a journey of growth and learning. Forgiveness plays a crucial role in restoring unity within a home. Every relationship experiences moments of disappointment or misunderstanding. When those moments are left unresolved, they can create distance between people. Forgiveness allows those wounds to be released so that healing can begin. It does not erase the past, but it removes the barrier that prevents relationships from moving forward. Peaceful homes are often built through consistent acts of kindness. A gentle word, a thoughtful gesture, or a moment of encouragement can have a powerful impact. These simple expressions of care remind family members that they are appreciated and loved. Over time, kindness becomes a habit that shapes the emotional atmosphere of the home. Love within a family also grows through shared experiences. Spending time together, whether through conversation, meals, or simple moments of connection, strengthens the bonds between people. These moments create memories that build trust and deepen relationships. When families make space for meaningful time together, unity naturally becomes stronger. Restoring peace sometimes requires humility. There may be moments when someone needs to admit that they were wrong or apologize for words spoken in frustration. Humility does not weaken a person's dignity. It strengthens relationships by showing sincerity and respect. A sincere apology can open the door to healing that might otherwise remain closed. The presence of God in a home transforms the environment in subtle but powerful ways. When prayer becomes part of daily life, the home begins to reflect values of patience, gratitude, and compassion. These qualities shape the way family members interact with one another. The home becomes a place where faith influences behavior and encourages kindness. Many families experience seasons of difficulty, yet those seasons do not define the future. With time, understanding, and prayer, relationships can be renewed. Hearts that once felt distant can reconnect. Conversations that once felt tense can become peaceful again. God's presence brings wisdom that helps families navigate challenges with grace. Unity also grows when family members support one another during difficult moments. Life presents challenges that can feel overwhelming when faced alone. When families stand together with encouragement and understanding, those challenges become easier to carry. Support strengthens trust and reminds each person that they are not alone. Peaceful homes often develop rhythms that nurture emotional well-being. These rhythms might include moments of shared prayer, conversations at the end of the day, or simple traditions that bring everyone together. These practices create stability and remind each person that the home is a place of care and connection. Restoring love within a family also involves recognizing the value of each individual. Every person brings unique gifts, perspectives, and strengths to the family. When those qualities are appreciated, people feel seen and respected. Appreciation encourages confidence and strengthens the emotional bond between family members. Sometimes restoring unity requires patience. Healing relationships is not always an instant process. It may involve learning new ways of communicating and allowing time for trust to rebuild. Patience allows these changes to unfold naturally without forcing immediate results. Prayer for family unity often begins with simple requests for wisdom. Asking God to guide your words and actions helps create a calmer environment. When God's wisdom influences your responses, conversations become more constructive and conflicts become easier to resolve. Love in a home is often expressed through consistency. When family members know they can rely on one another for support and understanding, they feel secure. This consistency builds a sense of stability that strengthens the foundation of the family. Peace also grows when gratitude becomes part of daily life. When people take time to acknowledge the good things in their relationships, their focus shifts away from frustration. Gratitude reminds us that even in imperfect situations, there are moments of joy and connection worth appreciating. Restoring unity in the home is a journey that involves both faith and intentional effort. It requires a willingness to grow, to forgive, and to choose love even when circumstances feel challenging. Through these choices, families can gradually build an environment where peace becomes the natural atmosphere. God's desire for families is not conflict, but harmony. His wisdom guides people toward understanding and patience. When families seek His presence together, they discover new ways to strengthen their relationships and support one another through every season of life. Let me ask you something important that invites reflection. When you think about your home right now, what is the one thing you believe would bring more peace and unity into your family? Is it better communication, more patience, forgiveness, or spending more meaningful time together? Take a moment to truly think about that question, because awareness is the first step toward change. When you recognize what your home needs most, you can begin praying for that specific area and taking small steps toward improvement. I encourage you to share your answer in the comments. Be honest about what you believe could bring more peace, love, or unity into your home right now. Your response might inspire someone else who is also praying for restoration in their family, reminding them that many people are walking this journey of faith and healing together. Faith has a remarkable ability to change the way we see our circumstances. When challenges arise in the area of finances, many people begin to feel pressure, uncertainty, and worry about the future. Bills, responsibilities, and unexpected needs can create a sense of heaviness that touches every part of daily life. Yet faith invites us to look beyond the immediate pressures and remember that God's provision is not limited by human circumstances. Activating faith for financial miracles begins with trusting that God is aware of every need and that His ability to provide reaches far beyond what we can see. Financial miracles are not simply about sudden wealth or dramatic changes in a single moment. Sometimes they appear as unexpected opportunities, new ideas, helpful connections, or wisdom that leads to better decisions. God's provision often works through doors that open at just the right time. What once looked impossible can begin to shift when faith aligns the heart with God's promises and guidance. Faith grows when we choose to focus on God's faithfulness rather than our fears. Fear constantly reminds us of what we lack, while faith reminds us of what God is able to do. The more we reflect on the ways God has helped us in the past, the stronger our confidence becomes for the future. Each testimony of provision becomes a reminder that God's care has never failed. Activating faith for financial miracles begins with a shift in perspective. Instead of seeing financial challenges as permanent obstacles, faith encourages us to view them as temporary seasons that God can guide us through. When we bring our concerns to God in prayer, we are acknowledging that His wisdom can lead us towards solutions we may not yet see. Prayer becomes a powerful foundation in this journey. When you pray about your finances, you invite God's guidance into your decisions and plans. Prayer calms the mind and opens the heart to receive insight. It reminds you that you are not navigating financial responsibilities alone. God's presence becomes a source of peace and direction. Trusting God's provision does not mean ignoring responsibility. Faith works alongside diligence and wisdom. As you pray for financial breakthroughs, you also take practical steps, managing resources wisely, seeking opportunities, and making thoughtful choices. Faith strengthens these efforts by adding confidence and clarity. There is a quiet strength that comes from knowing that God understands every detail of your situation. He knows the pressures you face, the responsibilities you carry, and the hopes you hold for your future. When you bring these concerns before Him, you are placing them into the hands of a loving Father who desires your well-being. Financial miracles often begin with gratitude. Gratitude shifts the focus from scarcity to appreciation. When you acknowledge the blessings already present in your life, your heart becomes more open to recognizing new opportunities. Gratitude also reminds you that God has been faithful even in seasons when resources felt limited. Faith-filled thinking also shapes the way we speak about our circumstances. Words carry influence over our perspective. When we speak with hope and confidence, our mindset begins to align with the possibilities God can create. Positive declarations of trust replace the discouraging thoughts that fear often produces. God's provision sometimes arrives through unexpected channels. A new opportunity may appear in a place you did not anticipate. Someone may offer assistance or encouragement at exactly the right moment. A creative idea may come to your mind that leads to progress. These moments often feel like quiet reminders that God is actively guiding your path. Patience plays an important role in activating faith for financial miracles. Not every answer appears immediately, yet that does not mean God is absent. Often He is preparing circumstances that will unfold in the right time. Patience allows faith to remain steady while waiting for those preparations to come together. Many people discover that financial challenges also become opportunities for spiritual growth. During these seasons, faith deepens, and dependence on God becomes stronger. Prayer becomes more sincere, gratitude becomes more meaningful, and trust becomes more genuine. These qualities shape the heart in ways that last long after the season has passed. Generosity also holds a powerful place in the journey of financial faith. When people choose to give, even in small ways, they express trust that God's provision is greater than their fears. Generosity shifts the focus from holding tightly to resources towards sharing blessings with others. This mindset often opens the door for new opportunities and greater joy. Faith for financial miracles also includes believing that God can guide your creativity and abilities. Each person carries gifts and talents that can contribute to growth and opportunity. When you pray for guidance, God may reveal ways to use those gifts in new directions. Skills that once seemed ordinary can become pathways to provision. Peace is another important aspect of faith during financial challenges. Worry drains energy and clouds decision-making, while peace brings clarity and strength. When you place your trust in God's care, your mind becomes calmer. This calmness allows you to think more clearly and make wiser choices. God's provision is not always measured solely by numbers or material gain. Sometimes it appears as stability, wisdom, or protection during uncertain times. These forms of provision are just as meaningful because they sustain your life and guide you toward lasting well-being. Faith also encourages long-term perspective. Instead of focusing only on immediate difficulties, you begin to see your financial journey as part of a larger story. God may be guiding you toward opportunities that will unfold gradually, shaping your future in ways you cannot yet imagine. Many people discover that when they trust God with their finances, their relationship with Him grows deeper. They begin to see how closely God cares about every aspect of their lives. This realization strengthens their faith and encourages them to continue seeking His guidance in every decision. Consistency in prayer and faith-filled thinking builds spiritual resilience. Each day that you choose trust over fear, your confidence becomes stronger. Each prayer spoken with sincerity becomes another step toward the breakthrough you are believing for. Financial miracles sometimes arrive through wisdom that prevents difficulties before they occur. Guidance from God can help you avoid decisions that might create unnecessary challenges. This kind of wisdom protects your resources and strengthens your future. Faith also encourages community and support. God often places people in our lives who can offer advice, encouragement, or opportunities. Being open to learning from others and sharing experiences can provide valuable insight during financial journeys. The journey of activating faith for financial miracles reminds us that God's provision is both practical and spiritual. He guides decisions, opens opportunities, strengthens character, and provides peace during uncertainty. Each of these elements works together to support the path forward. Trusting God with your finances invites you to release anxiety about the future. Instead of carrying the weight of uncertainty alone, you place your confidence in the one who holds every possibility. This trust creates freedom within your heart. As faith grows, your perspective continues to shift. You begin to see possibilities where once you saw limitations. Opportunities that once seemed distant begin to appear more clearly. Confidence replaces hesitation, and hope replaces fear. God's ability to provide is not limited by the circumstances that surround you today. His wisdom can create solutions beyond what you currently imagine. Through prayer, faith, and perseverance, new doors can open and new paths can appear. Each step taken in faith strengthens the belief that provision will come. Every prayer spoken in trust builds a foundation of hope. Over time, these moments create a testimony of how God's guidance and care carried you through seasons of uncertainty. Faith for financial miracles invites the heart to remain calm even when answers have not yet appeared. It encourages you to keep trusting, keep praying, and keep moving forward with confidence that God is working in ways you may not yet see. As you continue to activate faith in your financial journey, your spirit becomes steadier and your outlook becomes brighter. The presence of God brings reassurance that every need is known and every concern is heard. Your story becomes a reflection of trust, patience, and hope. The journey itself becomes evidence that God's provision is not limited by circumstances, but guided by His wisdom and love. There is a quiet power in the words we speak over our lives. Words are more than sounds carried through the air. They are expressions of belief, reflections of what the heart holds within. When someone begins declaring God's promises over their life, they are doing more than speaking hopeful statements. They are aligning their thoughts and expectations with the truth of what God has spoken. In moments when circumstances feel uncertain, these declarations become anchors for the soul, gently reminding the heart that God's promises remain steady and reliable. Declaring God's promises begins with understanding that His words carry authority and faithfulness. Throughout life's journey, people encounter situations that test their confidence and challenge their sense of direction. When those moments arrive, the mind may begin to dwell on fear or doubt. Yet the promises of God offer a different perspective. They remind us that God's intentions for His people are filled with hope, guidance, and restoration. When someone chooses to speak God's promises, they are training their mind to focus on truth rather than uncertainty. This practice gradually shapes the inner conversation that takes place within the heart. Instead of repeating thoughts of discouragement, the heart begins to echo words of faith. These declarations bring calmness because they direct attention toward God's character rather than temporary circumstances. The act of declaring God's promises is closely connected with faith. Faith grows when it is expressed through words and actions. When you speak a promise from God with sincerity, you are affirming that you believe His word is trustworthy. This affirmation strengthens your spirit and reminds you that your life is not governed solely by what you see around you. Many people discover that speaking God's promises creates a peaceful rhythm in their daily life. In the quiet moments of prayer or reflection, they repeat words that remind them of God's care and guidance. These moments become times of spiritual renewal. The mind grows calmer, and the heart becomes more confident in God's presence. God's promises cover every area of life. They speak about peace in times of worry, strength in times of weakness, provision in times of need, and hope in times of uncertainty. When someone declares these promises, they invite the truth of God's word to shape their outlook on life. Instead of allowing fear to define the future, they allow God's promises to illuminate the path ahead. The practice of declaring God's promises also influences emotional well-being. Words of faith bring reassurance to the heart. They remind you that you are not facing life's challenges alone. God's presence remains near, offering guidance and comfort in every season. Sometimes the promises of God feel distant when circumstances appear difficult. In those moments, declarations of faith become even more important. Speaking God's promises during challenging times strengthens resilience. It encourages the heart to keep trusting even when the outcome is not yet visible. The power of spoken faith is not about denying reality, but about bringing God's truth into that reality. When someone declares that God is faithful, they are acknowledging that his character does not change even when circumstances fluctuate. This awareness brings stability during uncertain seasons. Many people find that repeating God's promises daily helps transform their perspective. Over time, the mind begins to adopt a more hopeful outlook. The heart becomes less focused on problems and more attentive to possibilities. Faith grows gradually through this consistent practice. Declarations of God's promises also influence the atmosphere around us. Words carry emotional and spiritual weight. When a home or environment is filled with words of encouragement and faith, it creates a sense of peace. These words inspire those who hear them and remind everyone that hope is always present. God's promises often speak directly to the deepest needs of the human heart. They remind us that we are loved, valued, and guided. When someone declares these truths, they reinforce their identity as someone who is cared for by God. This identity strengthens confidence and encourages perseverance. Faith-filled declarations also bring clarity during moments of confusion. When life presents difficult decisions, speaking God's promises helps center the mind on wisdom and trust. These words create space for calm reflection rather than anxious reaction. Another beautiful aspect of declaring God's promises is that it encourages gratitude. When you speak words that acknowledge God's goodness, your heart naturally begins to appreciate the blessings already present in your life. Gratitude and faith often grow together, strengthening one another. The promises of God are timeless, yet each person experiences them in unique ways. For one person, a promise may bring comfort during grief. For another, it may inspire courage during a new beginning. Declaring these promises allows individuals to connect with God's truth in the context of their personal journey. Consistency plays an important role in this practice. The more often someone speaks God's promises, the more deeply those words settle within their heart. Over time, these declarations become natural responses to life's challenges. Many people discover that declaring God's promises also strengthens their prayers. Instead of focusing only on requests, their prayers become filled with gratitude and trust. They remind themselves of God's faithfulness while presenting their needs. The calmness that comes from speaking God's promises often extends beyond the individual. Family members, friends, and colleagues may notice the steady confidence that grows from a life grounded in faith. Words of hope can inspire others to seek the same peace. When someone declares God's promises over their life, they are participating in a spiritual conversation that spans generations. Believers throughout history have spoken these same truths, finding strength and guidance in them. This shared experience creates a sense of connection with a larger community of faith. There is also a gentle discipline involved in choosing words carefully. Instead of allowing negative thoughts to dominate conversations, people who declare God's promises intentionally speak words that build faith. This discipline gradually reshapes the way they respond to challenges. God's promises also remind us that growth is a lifelong journey. Each season brings new opportunities to trust and learn. Declarations of faith encourage patience, helping individuals remain hopeful while waiting for answers to unfold. The beauty of declaring God's promises is that it invites God's truth into everyday moments. Whether during quiet prayer, a walk in the morning, or a reflection at the end of the day, these words create a steady rhythm of faith. As time passes, the practice of speaking God's promises becomes part of a person's identity. It shapes their outlook, their conversations, and their expectations. The heart becomes accustomed to trusting God's goodness. Faith-filled declarations also remind us that God's promises are not limited by time or circumstance. They remain constant even when life changes. This consistency brings reassurance that God's guidance will continue throughout every stage of life. Each declaration becomes a quiet affirmation that hope is stronger than fear. With every spoken promise, the heart moves closer to the peace that comes from trusting God's word. The journey of declaring God's promises transforms the inner life of a believer. It strengthens faith, calms anxiety, and encourages perseverance. Through these words, the heart learns to rest in the assurance that God's presence is constant and his promises are faithful. There is a profound connection between the words we speak and the direction our lives take. Words are not merely expressions of thought. They are reflections of belief and carriers of influence. When a person begins aligning their words with divine authority, they are choosing to allow God's truth to guide their speech. This alignment brings clarity to the mind and strength to the heart. It transforms ordinary conversation into declarations of faith that shape both attitude and expectation. Every day, people speak thousands of words without always realizing how deeply those words affect their mindset and emotions. Some words encourage hope and confidence, while others create doubt and discouragement. When someone becomes aware of the influence of their speech, they begin to recognize the importance of choosing words carefully. Aligning your words with divine authority means speaking in ways that reflect God's wisdom, love, and truth. The process begins with understanding that God's authority is rooted in truth and faithfulness. When you allow his perspective to guide your words, your speech begins to carry a different tone. Instead of reacting to situations with fear or frustration, you respond with calm assurance and trust in God's guidance. This shift may appear small at first, but over time it transforms the atmosphere around you. Speaking with divine alignment does not require complex language or dramatic declarations. Often it begins with simple expressions of faith. When you say, "I trust that God will guide me," you are affirming your belief in his presence. When you say, "Peace will fill this